Hey everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of Dropped Among This Crowd. I'm really excited to get into this week's little mini adventure down to Atlanta for the 20th annual Atlanta Canada Fest. But before we get into all of that, I also want to talk a little bit about the night before, which was May 1st, and my experience seeing the Strictly Hip perform with the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra here at Kleinhans Music Hall. That was actually my first time experiencing this kind of rock meets orchestra performance live. I know that might be surprising to hear, but it was my first live experience with the orchestra there. And honestly, it was beyond fascinating hearing the Tragically Hip's music presented in such a different way. More cinematic, more layered, and emotional in such a completely different way than a traditional rock show, which goes without saying, but with this catalog, it really gave a lot of depth to the songs in new ways. And I'm just going to say it now. The Depression Suite should only be performed with a full orchestra accompaniment from this point forward. That's just all I'm going to say about that. And if you checked out my episode last week where I talked about the new musical, It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken, and my experience of seeing that and the Hips catalog within that production, it's been very interesting the last couple of weeks experiencing this band's catalog in a couple of different and new ways. So that is very cool, for sure, to say the least. So going from that experience with the BPO one night to Atlanta Canada Fest the next day and seeing the Strictly Hip in a full outdoor festival atmosphere was such an interesting contrast. Anyway, hey music lovers, Sara J here. Looking for an inclusive space where you can connect with fellow fans, deep dive into your favorite music, and be a part of something special? Well, look no further. Join us on Patreon, where music and community come together. Get exclusive content, behind-the-scenes access, and a place to geek out over the artists you love, plus explore music you haven't heard yet. Come hang out with us. Patreon.com/DATC Media Company. That's patreon.com/DATC Media Company. See you there. A member of the DATC Media family. Hey everyone, welcome back to Dropped Among This Crowd. I'm Sara J, and this week I'm taking you down to Atlanta, Georgia for the 20th annual Atlanta Canada Fest, a celebration of Canadian music, culture, community, and of course, a whole lot of Tragically Hip love. If you were looking for a place to happen, May 2nd, Wild Heaven Brewery Garden Club in Atlanta's West End was absolutely it. Atlanta Canada Fest brought together a full day of live music, hockey, curling, food, Canadian pride, and connections for Canadians living away from home, along with anyone wanting to experience a little piece of Canada in the ATL. One thing that I really loved about this event was that it wasn't just about the music. The festival also featured various vendors and sponsors, some providing valuable resources and information pertaining to Canadian citizenship, all sorts of other different, really fun on-brand resources and information for everybody in attendance. And I really thought that that was such a really well-rounded part of the whole thing, for sure. Musically, the night built anticipation in the best way. Ryan Clifford kicked things off while the 2/4s worked through a multi-generational set list of Canadian artists. I had the band send me a set list when I was working on this episode just to make sure that I got them all correctly, and I was thoroughly impressed then, but definitely looking at their set list with, I think they did a fantastic job of really covering a great range of Canadian artists. Bare Naked Ladies, Alanis Morissette, Nelly Furtado, Crash Test Dummies, Neil Young, Salone, Glass Tiger, Bryan Adams, the band, Rush, Our Lady Peace, just to name a few. But they did a fantastic job of writing their set list. And as I said in my review over on Patreon, that it was the type of set list that would make you want to keep feeding loonies into the jukebox. The weather was so beautiful, and this was actually the first year that they had the festival in the beginning of May instead of the late June date close to Canada Day. If you don't know, Canada Day is July 1st. So usually the event happens at the end of June. However, this year they had it at the beginning of May. And if I'm voting, I vote for having it at the beginning of May. I think the weather was absolutely beautiful. And as the sun set over the brewery, gorgeous, gorgeous Atlanta evening. This event proved why it has become such a beloved tradition over the last 2 decades. Not only just for the Canadian expats, but for music lovers and community-minded people alike. There were plenty of folks I noticed, and talking to Marty after the event, there were plenty of folks that wandered up because they saw a good time was happening. They heard the music, they saw a bunch of people hanging out, and they decided to just come check it out and then wound up sticking around. So what an awesome time. And this was in a really interesting part of Atlanta that I'm not familiar with. I actually haven't been to Atlanta since 2018. I figured it out a couple days ago when I was trying to think about exactly when it was. 2018 was the last time I was in Atlanta. So it was awesome just to be back in that city anyways. It's definitely one of my favorite cities. But this was a really cool part of the city, and it was really neat just to see a bunch of people walking up or doing their own thing kind of in the area and noticing what a good time was happening and wanting to come and check it out and stick around. So that was really awesome. They did have a DJ that was spinning all kinds of music during the day in between music, and I do have to shout him out because he accomplished the nearly impossible task of not playing a single Tragically Hip song throughout the entire event to keep the crowd waiting and wanting the two massive sets that the Strictly Hip were going to play to close out the evening. And what the Strictly Hip delivered was equal parts nostalgia and rock show energy. An interesting contrast from their much different but equally powerful performance with the Buffalo Philharmonic the night before. The band let the set list for this night in Atlanta to unfold naturally, just allowing the energy in the crowd to guide the night. I am the set list gal. I always ask for a set list. And during set break, everybody went back to get waters and stuff. And I said to Frank, don't forget my set list. He said, we didn't write a set list for tonight. We are just winging it, going with how it feels in the moment. And the guys were definitely, Jeremy would call it out in the moment what they were going to play next. And it was great because it was just like, all right, what are we feeling right now? What is the energy right now? All right, let's go with that. A few songs into the first set, lead singer Jeremy Hoyle paused to express gratitude for the evening and just everybody that was gathered there and all of the work that Marty put into making all of this come together. And at one point led the crowd in a very powerful and emotional singing of the Canadian national anthem. And the moment felt especially heart-wrenching after the recent Buffalo Sabres playoff game where the crowd finished singing the Canadian national anthem after the singer's microphone cut out. There is video circulating literally everywhere. So many people sent me the video the day after. If you know me, I don't give a fuck about hockey, but the Buffalo Sabres are in the playoffs right now as we're recording this. And so it's a big deal for sure, of course. And one of the games versus the Bruins a couple of weeks ago, the singer's microphone cut out and everyone in the KeyBank Center, which is the arena here in Buffalo, all of the fans, picked up the slack and finished the national anthem. So, of course, it went viral. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, Buffalo is so awesome. I'm like, yes, I know. So it felt a little especially more nostalgic because of that. But do a quick Google search if you haven't seen it. Like, you'll literally find it so fast. And then you'll find it if you have no idea what I'm talking about and you want to check it out. But it was all over. And honestly, it was so much fun that even though this was a Canadian festival, Buffalo connections were woven throughout the entire day. There was even one guy who was there who was proudly rocking a Mighty Taco t-shirt. And if you're from Buffalo, you know. And I've always said, Buffalo is basically Canada anyways. I said it again today. When I was having a lunch meeting, I said it, that Buffalo is basically Canada anyways. By the end of this night in Atlanta, it generally felt like you had been transported 1,000 miles north. Honestly, sports backers bars, eat your heart out. I have never been to a sports backer bar. Sports are not my thing. And so I've never been to a sports backer bar. I've seen them on TV. I have a pretty good idea and gist of what it's like inside. And this was totally that in just such a much cooler way, in my opinion, just because I am not sports gal. this was just totally everything that is amazing about being in a sports backer bar, I would assume. Honestly, I think the only thing missing from the evening was a box of Timbits and somebody dressed like Robin Sparkles. If you know, you know. And I've said this a couple times here on the show, but this especially rang true that night with current world events being what they are. Connections like this between Canada and the United States feel especially important. Something that Jeremy also mentioned during the band set, that things like this really connect people. Music connects people and brings people from different backgrounds and countries and ages and, you know, financial backgrounds and just all of the things that make us different don't matter in the moment when we all come together for music. And that will always be one of my favorite things about music. I talk about it all the time here in various ways on the show and across the whole media company. But that night really rang true. You know, just turning on the news and constantly seeing some sort of debauchery and craziness in all of the various forms. But then when you come together in a space like that with a group of people from all over, it's just something really, really special. Ahead of the festival, I had the chance to sit down with Atlanta Canada Fest founder Marty Seed here on the podcast. Scroll back, I believe it's 2 or 3 episodes. I can't remember, but just scroll back, you'll see them. And we talked about the history of the event, Atlanta's music scene, and what keeps people coming back year after year. And Atlanta Canada Fest, just quickly, it started as a way to connect Canadian expats through AtlanticCanadians.com. And it has grown into a full-scale cultural celebration filled with live music, family-friendly activities, and a whole lot of Canadian spirit. It was so fun to see all the little kids running around and just having a great time. Just a really awesome environment, too, where you could take your kids and you can listen to some music, have a drink if you want, hang out with some people. Your kids can run around and have a good time, and you don't have to be so super worried, you know, like you don't have to be watching them the entire time. It was a cool space for everybody to just hang out and have a lot of fun. Last week, Marty shared something that really stuck with me. He said, after 20 of these, I thought I'd be close to having enough. This year made my heart swell seeing old friends, seeing families and kids that have grown along with the festival. And honestly, after spending the day immersed in the energy of the festival, it's easy to understand why Marty continues to make it happen. For the people, for the community, and for the love of bringing everyone together to celebrate Canada. If you want even more coverage from the weekend, including my full written review, you can head over to Patreon. There is plenty of free content over there. And if you'd like to support the show and everything that DATC Media is doing, the monthly membership is $10 a month and gives you all access to everything I'm posting and sharing over there now and in the future and in the past. You unlock all sorts of really fun stuff that has already been released and just hanging out over there. So you can check that out at patreon.com/DATC Media Company. Love. Thanks so much for listening to Dropped Among This Crowd. Be sure to follow along on Instagram and Facebook, and check out everything over at datcmediacompany.com. And I will see you around these parts next week.